Hi, this is Joe again with another review. And so for this video, I know I haven't been doing that many reviews of anything that much, uh, because I've been concentrating on my campaign for the board for my board of directors for my co-op. So I've been doing videos, concentrating on videos on that. Now I'm going to be a little behind, and I don't know how much further I'm going to be behind because I don't know if I'm going to be elected or not. The campaign process just started, or the election process just started. So for this video, I'm going to discuss the board election for my co-op. I'm going to do that in this video. I know I'm about a week late, no more than a week late to do this video, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do a tribute to one of the greatest wrestling managers of all time, which is Bobby the Brain Heenan, who passed away a little more than a week ago. And he lived to about 73 years old. In the last few years, recent years, he's been very sick. He had and believe the story was that he actually did die of throat cancer. But he also, I had to say, he also had a stroke. He couldn't speak anymore. He lost a ton of weight, and his face was stretched down like this, and it was really sad. What happened to Bobby Heenan over the last few months? Not only the last few months, but the last few years of his life. But he was one of the most colorful characters there's ever in wrestling. When I first started watching him, Bobby Heenan was already in WWF, what was then called the WWF, for a little more than a year, for at least a year when I started watching wrestling. And then got into it to about the summer of '85. He was already there for a year. He's already building up a pretty big stable. Well, actually, he never approved of the same stable of all the guys he managed. But when he called it was the Heenan family, and this Heenan family was like huge. Some of the biggest names and the biggest bodies in professional wrestling, especially in the '80s. He managed? I'm not kidding. It's like a who's who. He managed Paul Orndorff. He managed Big John Studd. He had King Kong Bundy. He eventually, of course, managed Andre the Giant. He managed Rick Rude. He eventually managed Hercules Hernandez. He once managed Ken Patera, and then he turned heel, and then Ken Patera turned babyface, and then that was it for that on that deal. He had and also Paul Orndorff eventually turned babyface, and then back to being a heel when he had a rivalry with Hulk Hogan. He also managed the Red Rooster. He managed Terry Taylor. The Red Rooster was one of the worst wrestlers that he ever managed. He also managed the Brooklyn Brawler, or Steve Lombardi, who was also one of the worst wrestlers. It was like one of the guys who always loses. And he used to have the TV tapings, and when you have the shows on the weekend, on this live broadcast they have now. Let's see, who else he used to manage? I know I'm probably leaving some guys out. But he had a huge run. And he also managed the Brainbusters, Owen Anderson and Tully Blanchard. He managed I think that's about all the guys that I could think of. And then eventually he had to give up managing and became a color commentator, which was like 86 or 87, became a color commentator. And he stayed there till pretty much the rest of his career. Even when he went to WCW in '94. He left WCW and he left the WWF to go to WCW. And then when they folded, and Bobby Heenan came back, and he announced one match with Mean Gene Okerlund, who both of them came back to WWF for WrestleMania 17. He managed, not managed, but he announced the gimmick Battle Royal in WrestleMania 17. But he had such a huge run. They also, oh yeah, I forgot to also mention he also managed Harley Race. He also managed the King Harley Race for a while. He managed but I mean, it's like who did he manage? Of course, in the mid '80s, Bobby Heenan was obsessed with managing a guy to beat Hulk Hogan for the heavyweight championship. And one of the first guys he had was King Kong Bundy, who of course famously squashed Hogan in the Saturday Night's Main Event episode, which I saw. Then of course he had the famous cage match at WrestleMania 2. So like the first of two main events that Bobby Heenan was involved in. Of course the second one was, of course, the most famous one, was with Andre the Giant. And that they hyped that one so much, and you could tell that was going to be had to be a real huge match to draw 93,000 people in the for WrestleMania 3. Of course, very rarely since then, especially during the 90s, and of course through the Attitude era, even today, you don't have that really huge, major main event anymore. And maybe you had John Cena versus The Rock, or The Undertaker would wrestle somebody. But most of the time, The Undertaker didn't have the main event. Unless he was wrestling for the heavyweight title, he wasn't in the main event a lot of the times during his streak. But to have that, because when I had the WrestleMania 3, there was the first WrestleMania that was not in a low in an arena that was set up maybe 20,000, if that. Because the first WrestleMania was in Madison Square Garden, and they had almost 20,000 people in there. The third year, you had on the second WrestleMania, you had 3 separate locations in New York and National Coliseum, which had maybe 18,000. Same thing in Chicago, the Rosemont Horizon, and same thing in the LA Sports Arena. But and I heard that it wasn't completely sold out, especially in Chicago. The Chicago portion of it wasn't completely sold out. So you had McMahon had to come up with a huge main event. And then, of course, the main event was in those days was usually for the championship belt, and it was going to be Hulk Hogan wrestling somebody. You had to think of somebody big, and what else could be Andre the Giant was the biggest guy. And Andre took some time off to film the Princess Bride movie, so he wasn't available to wrestle. So I figured, okay, let's bring Andre back. And Andre was already moving slow at that time, and he would pass away 6 years later. Who unfortunately would pass away at the age of 53. So there was his one shot to get some big purse money, and of course it would draw attention to WrestleMania 3, which of course it did. And they did it, and you can see the hype for it on YouTube. When the Piper's Pit, with Roddy Piper. When Hogan got this big trophy for his big 3 years as a champ, which is a pretty big run as a champ. Nowadays, you really lucky if a guy is 6 months a heavyweight champ. Today in this era, but for 3 years, it's like a huge deal. You can't even think of a guy being a champ for 3 years. In this generation of wrestling. So when they had WrestleMania 3, you said, okay, who was he going to hype? And then Andre came in and says, and of course Hogan was the real champion of superstars. Of course, because Andre was never a champ. I'm sure he might have early in his career, like in the late 70s or even early 80s, of the pre-WrestleMania era. I'm sure he might have had a championship match with somebody here and there, but he never. And I don't think he ever really had a championship match with anybody. And he never won a heavyweight championship before. So, thinking that there was time to give him a championship, after 15 years being in professional wrestling, to give him a chance, he was undefeated. the only guy who's never been undefeated, has never been body slammed before, and all this stuff. And so they did the stupid bit with the trophy, and of course you could tell that Hogan's trophy was larger than Andre's trophy, even though it was identical to the same trophy. But I think what they did was they lowered the one table was like lower than the other one. I mean, you couldn't see the length of the height of the two tables. It looks like they had on two separate tables. One was higher than the other one, so it looks like the Hogan's trophy was bigger than Andre's trophy. And then Hogan came out, so Andre's thunder and all that stuff. And so they had the famous confrontation on the Piper's Pit when Andre came out with Bobby Heenan. He said, "What are you doing with Bobby Heenan?" And Andre's going, "What are you doing with Bobby Heenan? What are you doing with this guy? You know what he's been doing to me for last year. Because last year he had Bundy against him, Hercules Hernandez against him, Paul Orndorff, Big John Studd, all these big guys going against Hogan to be in for the heavyweight title, one guy after the other, and Heenan's stable, and one guy after the other." And he says, "Okay." And then of course Andre says to him, "Look at me when I talk to you," and he rips the shirt off and Hogan's shirt off. And of course they had the huge match at WrestleMania 3, and of course they lost. Then of course 2 years later, Bobby Heenan finally managed to champ when Rick Rude beat the Ultimate Warrior. With a little help from Bobby Heenan because he held Warrior's leg down or tripped him up, and Rick Rude was on top of him, and he got the pinfall. And of course naturally the referee doesn't see it. And then of course his tag team got the Brainbusters won the tag team titles, but Bobby Heenan never managed a guy that won the heavyweight title. And then after the Rick Rude match, which I mentioned, it was at WrestleMania 5, Heenan was severely beaten up by the Ultimate Warrior, and he injured his neck very severely, and he had to pretty much quit managing. He managed a couple of guys, but he didn't really get physically involved in matches anymore because of the injury to his throat and to his neck. And then eventually he was diagnosed in the early 2000, like 2002, of having throat cancer. And of course, you see him they have the speech, Hall of Fame speech. He was inducted to the WWF Hall of Fame, and he was really, really sick. But Bobby Heenan was really great on commentary with the zingers and stuff like that, especially with the 1992 Royal Rumble. He was involved with Ric Flair, and I also forgot to mention Bobby Heenan also managed Kurt Hennig. He was really the last real big guy or huge wrestler that Bobby Heenan managed before he quit altogether. Of course, the famous bit that he had when he left wrestling was in '94, when he was constantly taunting or making fun of Gorilla Monsoon. And so Gorilla Monsoon grabs and picks him up and literally threw him out, threw his luggage out, threw his bag out that he had with his clothes in it, and threw all that stuff out, and that's how Bobby Heenan left. Instead of having him getting fired straight, he just Gorilla Monsoon threw Bobby Heenan out with the garbage. And of course, like, hey, what happened? Bobby Heenan is out. He was out for that. It's just kind of sad that Heenan left that way. I didn't like the way he left. He was such a colorful character in WWF and WCW. I didn't really hear his commentary that much in WCW because I didn't watch WCW. But he really is, really a big hole in professional wrestling is there now without Bobby Heenan. And nowadays you don't have managers anymore. Maybe Paul Heyman, maybe. But not to have Bobby Heenan there anymore, or guys like Bobby Heenan or Classy Freddie Blassie, who also died, unless it's Johnny Valiant, who also passed away. There's only one real great two managers that are still left, that are still alive. That's Jimmy Hart and Slick, that I grew up watching. And Jimmy Hart is the only really great manager left in the WWF who's still alive. And it's really sad what happened to Bobby. God bless him. Let him rest in peace and sympathies go out to his family. So another video for my tribute to Bobby Heenan. Please click on the video, please rate it. Feel free to comment on it. Please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. You can check out all my videos and on my YouTube channel by rallyc.com. There's OWDY C.com. It's the homepage of the Rally Reviewer, Chris Lee Moore, and please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.